I've been watching quite a few debates lately, conversations, and basically videos like everybody else does that are all directed from SAWs toward us, intersectional feminists, the Black Lives Matter stuff, watching the news essentially. And there's a lot going on, right? I don't want to make this another news channel where I just read headlines, so I try to avoid that. It's not as popular, but when everybody else is talking about it, I don't want to be the other one that has to race to talk about it too, the first person on the scene. One of the fundamental changes I think that the news needs to do, as an off topic, is be first to be right, not first to be presented, first to be published. They need to be first to be right. I think that's much more of the ethical, noble goal that they need to do. Anyways, so I've been watching like the Hmong debate, for example, the one between Jordan Peterson and Stephen Fry was on there, so I know those two people. The other two people I don't remember. Go figure. And well, I don't remember their names anyway, but I do remember what they said. And I'm going to use that one to illustrate things a little bit. So there was some things that were said in the opening statements that really just caught my eye when it comes to the way to defend things, and so I wanted to do this at my first available chance, which is every other Friday, and kind of outline this. So what they do is they use some postmodern thinking, so everything's subjective, but then they also have to rely on sophistry because they can't use regular unflawed logic. They have to use sophistry for this to work, and I'll explain that in detail here. So what happens is, well, for first, those that don't know, sophistry is the use of any fallacy to prove your point, make an argument. The sophists of old used to do this to win debates and look smart, and the sophists of today use it when they have no opposition. When they're in a argument or in a debate or doing whatever, they tend to lose, and they lose drastically because people now can see it. They're trained on this. They understand it, which is good. We need to continue that. For anybody that has kids, I recommend the Book of Bad Arguments. It's free online, but you can buy it, and I recommend you buy it because it's an illustrated, fun book. And the people that created it really should get some money for making something that was really, really good. But I'll leave a link in the description for that guy. But, okay, so they use sophistry and they use a defense mechanism at the same time. And defense mechanisms are different from sophistry because defense mechanisms are just a method of argumentation, whereas defense mechanisms are things you throw up when you feel you're threatened or under attack, or if you think your ideology is basically a core value to you, or one of your core values you feel kind of threatened by. So to give you kind of an example, say somebody insults you, and that insult hits home. Like let's kind of use an old adjective that most people can be familiar with, I hope. That they insult your mother. Wouldn't work for me because I have no respect for my mother. But let's say that they insult your mother, and you do have lots of respect for her, and you say, wait a second, that's not cool. And, well, maybe you don't say that, but you think it. So the next thoughts, the next arguments that may come out of your mouth would be very defensive or offensive. You'd go on either side, you know. You'd start using argumentation that would escalate or de-escalate, depending on how you are. And so if it's an offensive method that you use, you'd still use all the same defense mechanisms, and there's quite a few in psychology. But these defense mechanisms would be projected onto that person, or you would use them to defend yourself in either way. And if you're using a defensive method, you'd use it to take a backup or to shut down conversation. So in other words, you could insult them, which is an offensive thing to say back, but then at the same time, you know, you defend yourself without having to do it. Plus, you use sophistry. So, for example, they insult your mother, you turn around and insult theirs, or use a sly coy like, "My mom's dead. What are you, a necrophiliac?" or something like that, right? And you'd use something like that. And that's how you'd get around it. But They use these type of things a little bit differently when it comes to group identity. And I noticed one in particular that they use quite a bit of that's really kind of annoying. And I find it very interesting, but I don't see anybody arguing against it. Like they don't. I've only heard Sargon of Akkad say this once out of everybody that they talk about. And it's actually easier to get around than most people think. And it would shut them up quite quickly because it might make them realize that they can't get away with doing things the way they do it. So let's step into it a little bit. So I heard in this Hmong debate in particular that the opening speaker was saying that he knows how people think of him. He knows that they don't see an articulate, educated man with a in his 60s that's in a suit and well respected and all that fun stuff, a professor. No, they see a black man. Well, that is classic projection. Clearly he finds his skin, his race, of high value. He values it more than other people's race, making him a racist, interestingly enough. When you value your race over somebody else's, that is the beginning thoughts of a racist. To even care about race, to begin with, starts you down the path of racism. The only time I care about race is in demographic information that might shed a light into, I don't know, the population, something like that. You do it in scientific studies all the time to understand kind of the demographics of what you're dealing with, because it is known that certain cultures and groups kind of tend to think differently than others. That's just a fact. They do. And there's not anything wrong with that, to say the least. It's just helpful information sometimes, not all the time. Like, I don't find it very useful in my particular studies because leadership is independent of any race. Leadership is also independent of any gender. However, men and women do approach leadership differently, and that is important. So knowing how somebody approaches something, it might be more effective than the other gender, for example, would be pretty helpful information, because then the other gender could adapt and take on some of that approach, or they could change their team to modify the team to align with their approach. I mean, it's kind of social dynamic stuff. But anyways, the thing that I see happening a lot with that projection is that they will claim that when somebody sees them, they don't see all the attributes that they want them to see. No, they just see a black man. Particularly, this is projected on cops, because cops often use demographical information, the easiest things to identify who you are, quickly and often. Like, black man in his 20s, no hair, wearing a white shirt, last seen at so and so forth. This is descriptive information of an individual. It's easy to identify a person if you give as much description as possible, like a scar on his right face, if they're close enough, tattoos on the arm or shoulder or whatever they can see, something that will distinctly describe a person quickly, because they can't capture your face in a camera every time they see you, right? And sometimes the people that are committing crimes won't necessarily be identifiable easily because maybe it's a murder. So there's no witnesses, right? No one to tell you who that person is or what they look like. So it could be literally anybody. So they have to do deductive reasoning to figure out who it is. Anyways, so the projection bit, I think, is the easiest that we could to destroy. And it comes down to one question, I think, or maybe a couple. There's a couple of ways to approach this. You could be insulting, or you can be very serious. And it all depends on how the conversation's gone thus far. I noticed with the people that I have conversations with that I tend to use a little bit of sarcasm when it comes to it. So I usually project in them, when did you become a part of the X-Men? I didn't know you could read minds. How the hell do you know what I think about you? Or anybody else for that matter? Are you able to project all these thoughts because, oh, I'm a white male? Aren't you now projecting your thoughts about white men upon me? Does that make you quite racist, I think? This is a group identity thing, and it's required for a group identity to work. For group identity to be anywhere as effective as they want it to be, they must therefore group a certain set of ideals, thoughts, and values upon the entire group, regardless if the group thinks it or not. It must be there for their ideology to work. Christians do this all the damn time when it comes to a variety of different subjects. The easiest one to point out is when they project that we do believe in God, we just hate God, or we do believe in God and just reject his existence, or something of that nature. We see that argument all the damn time, and it really comes down to, how the hell do you know what I think? Are you able to read minds? Are you able to read thoughts and beliefs? I don't think so. That's not true. You can't read shit. Don't lie to me. They're lying to your face, right? You can't read me. You can't read minds. No one on this planet is Professor Xavier. It doesn't exist, right? How do you know? Are you able to take anything that I've said and twist it out of context to make it sound like what you want it to be? That would be a straw man. And people do that too, of course. But I thought I'd show off the projection one a little bit, because it's actually not really a fallacy. It's a defense mechanism. It's something to protect their core value, their core ideal. They're something they have a lot of value in. They think has a lot of value. Race is the most obvious one, because anybody that's not of their race obviously thinks X way. And I saw that a lot with the border crossing stuff, and with, I think, Joy Reid was out there with a bunch of different people talking about how things were, and this is racist, this is how Nazis did it, and all this other shit. I'm going to do a different video on that. Oh my god, some people need to pick up a goddamn history book, because as much as they project that we need to pick up a history book and just read, some of us kind of paid attention in history class, and perhaps they should not be the ones projecting their idiocy on somebody else as if we're the idiots. That's another obvious assumption there. Why don't you go read a book? You don't know anything. Well, you don't know that. You're projecting your ignorance on somebody else at that point. So that's what I had for this. I thought it'd be interesting to point out that if anybody uses this type of argumentation, where they try to claim that they know how you think, they know that you think and you value this person this way, you look at them and this is what you see, they're projecting their ideology upon you. They're projecting their groupthink, their methodology that needs to maintain to be true for the rest of their little intersectional feminist belief system to be true. Without it, it's not. And that's why it fails so often. It's projection and it's political. It uses a Tukokei, I think it is, to project criticism from criticism. So we're calling them judgmental. We know they're judgmental racist idiots because they value race. But then they project that value of race upon those that do not. So the argumentation between the individualist and the collectivist, for example, is a classic example of groupthink ideological projection. Because in order for the individualist to be in the same boat or category as they want us to be, they must therefore project their ideology upon the entire group that we are a member of. So the straight white male that I'm a pleasure of being into would have to all think every other race is inferior, which I don't. They'd have to, I'd have to hate women. I've been married for 16 years, kind of hard to do. I'd also have to be a racist and hate all other races. That'd be news to my Filipino wife and my 4 kids. And yeah, that would be very interesting to have to lay a bombshell on my immigrant wife who's not a U.S. citizen. Well, that's all I got for this one. I thought it was pretty fun to point out, and maybe it'll present some better arguments for some people. I mean, projection is an easy thing to spot. when they just start saying, well, you don't know this, or all white men are like this, or stuff like that, I'm like, I'm a white male. How do you know that? Can you read minds? Are you capable of reading minds? Do you have superpowers? And if they answer yes, you do, say, okay, what am I thinking right now? And if they answer correctly, which is you're an idiot, wow, that's pretty impressive. You can read minds. Well, now what else am I thinking? There's it's political, it's a defense mechanism. It's because they value race. And when they value race, I don't mean that they think theirs is superior to everyone else. They could actually think theirs is inferior to everyone else, which is why you have things like white guilt. Speaking of which, my next one's going to be on the great white American distinction in some idiot's article about how we're all just kind of going to vanish from this world. It's really quite garbage, but it'll be fun. All right, thank you everybody for joining me this time. I know it's been 2 weeks since my last confession, but this is really the only time I get to do this stuff, so thank you.
I'll be back. I'm bringing some karate experts with me. They'll get you